was which guy? The New Deal guy? Was that Roosevelt?
Well, there was a few. There was Franklin. There was Teddy. Oh, yeah, we have a guest, too.
Don't say anything that will get me indicted in a court of law.
Promises.
Boner joined the military, right? In Growing Pains, he joined the Marines or something.
I thought that was in the Wonder Years. His friend joined the military.
Oh,
Is it Boner? Does
I don't
Boner
know,
too?
but I remember.
Did he have a hard-on for the military?
I thought I remember they go like, oh man, it's like hard losing your friend, and it's just like this weird thing. And it was Alan Thicke, and he goes, but it looks like there's going to be a boner in the military or something like that.
Something like
and
that.
I was like, I can't take this seriously.
I don't know how. Yeah, welcome to Tales from the Ditch. Starring Sean Allen Moss.
We're here with Tales from the Ditch.
And Seth Jacob Wildshoot filling in for NPR reader Bill Foster.
Ugh.
We're in page 15 of Roosevelt's book, Who Cares? Talking about polio. Page 15. Roosevelt, standing awkwardly on one leg, decided that today was a day he should think about the incident happening on the border. With brightened eye, no. So we have a guest. It's not Teddy Roosevelt. Spoiler. Mike Cox. What's your middle name?
Lee.
Oh, well, there you go. Mystery solved. So that's the end of the episode. We planned to do 60 minutes trying to guess his name. Oh, we were supposed to say we had stuff to win. Shoot.
Oh yeah, we don't know what it's going to be yet though. Here's the thing.
You're doing a giveaway?
We're doing a giveaway in honor of you being here. Something based on this podcast will result in people having the opportunity to win tickets to Striper.
That's true, yeah.
Striper, the band. You guys know who that is?
Nope.
I know.
Nope.
It's a Christian band called Striper. They're all about, so like, you had similar like hair bands, right? Like maybe Def Leppard or the Scorpions or something like that.
Right.
They're like that, except Christian. And instead of like a scorpion or a rat or something like that, they're all about bumblebees, pretty striped bumblebees.
I'm
black
trying
and
to
yellow.
blow smoke at the mosquitoes so they get addicted to nicotine and eventually die.
How's there even mosquitoes in here right now?
I don't know.
It's cold.
Hey, Mike, how you doing now? Mike works at the church, and he has been a big support to me, both
the church,
theologically and criminally. So, yeah.
Which was better for your life?
Well, right now, I can't say much because they're sealing my records. The DA's looking, so I prefer not to even speak on that, or anything that can be proven or stated in a court of law. Well, of course, theologically. I mean, Mike has, actually have really good discussions with him. Good discussions about God, about sovereignty, about grace. And I think the thing I appreciate is, you're very just consistent. You're very like, no, I stick to the core stuff and don't give way like me. I'm very heretical sometimes. So. I think I'm just more like, well, who's to say on stuff? And you're like, God, he's to say. And you're like, no, it's this. So yeah, theological. I've known you since you were 15, 16?
15, I believe. 15.
You and your no good brother, Ryan.
Yep.
But I saw recently. I don't know. Mike, what are we even doing here? Do you even know?
The smoke is thick.
Oh, sorry.
And, I can't see Sean anymore.
Well, and I want you to know I'm not really sorry, but I felt like that's what I'm supposed to say, so.
Sorry for what?
Oh, yeah. Good point. Rich.
Mike, I've known you since you were... Actually, how long have I known you? Probably since you were 17 or 18.
41 years in March.
You were in high school, I believe, senior in high school when I first...
I don't remember meeting you. The earliest memory I have of you is you showing up at a mall and there was some malfeasance.
For a fracas?
Yeah.
Yeah, I legally have to state I wasn't there.
Fracas that never happened. Nothing ever happened there.
Yeah, nothing went down.
And it never will, right, guys? You know who I'm talking to. Yeah.
Yeah, it was always interesting. They were like, we need to go to the mall. It was kind of like The Town. When he's like, there's a couple people I need you to hurt really bad and you can never ask me why. Exactly. It was kind of like that. It was like, hey, we need to go to the mall and do this thing.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, actually this morning I was thinking about how strange it is that we had friends who were just so eager to hurt people that you didn't have to provide an explanation.
No.
Yeah.
You just called and there they were.
Yeah, it was kind of nice. Like, and that's the thing. I mean,
it was kind of sweet, in its own way.
I didn't know you well, but I knew that Seth, who probably wasn't there at the mall that day.
I don't think he was.
Confirm or
Seth
deny.
said that I needed to go, so I did. Simple as that. Loyalty.
Yeah. I will just say this. There was a quote from a movie. There's nothing like having a bunch of your friends show up with guns. There's just something about it. Where are you going, Sean? Have you abandoned this podcast? Like you've abandoned reason?
You and Seth, I would say in your past lives, before you became acquainted with Jesus, you guys had a rage, I feel like something I would call maybe like a flexing rage or a clenching rage, right?
Spoiler, still got it.
I mean, but it was different because, around town, you'll hear stories about these episodes that may or may not have occurred. And you'll hear the protagonist is always the person with that flexing angry rage where, Seth, he'd have a vein in his neck that would pop out and it would be all crazy Bane-like.
Right.
And, Mike, you would have the dead eyes and you would just be prepared to walk into whatever it is. And I feel like I never had that.
You didn't have a marker.
I had more of a sad rage.
It was when you were drinking mainly.
And so instead of flexing muscles, I was just I would just be apathetic and just go kind of limp. I felt like I brought out
anger in you several times.
You did. I mean, I would get angry, but that was the thing. In order to be in a physical confrontation, I would have to be mad. I couldn't fight somebody that I didn't hate. You know what I mean? I would have to be
That's why you
enraged.
hate everyone. Yeah. If you hate everyone, you can fight everyone.
I know, that's what I'm saying. I never had that ability. I never had that ability.
Yeah.
It's weird. So it was interesting, though, because even though we were different in that way, we would still be able to get along and have some type of unity. Even though it was which of these people at the mall in the parking lot right now is not like the other? And it was always me because I was always there, not squaring off. You know what I mean? I was just in a regular stance, kind of like Shaggy on Scooby-Doo, and I was relaxed and not not intense.
See, but that was your advantage because nobody was suspecting Sean to come from the corner.
Exactly.
He shows up in slippers and...
I know, it was crazy.
Yeah, because I feel like everyone's been regaled by my stories, Regaled, is that the
regaled.
Word? Regaled?
What does that word mean?
Let's get down to the brass tacks. I've regaled.
I'm actually curious. I want to know from your perspective when you were... I find myself struggling to remember what it was like when I was making decisions like that.
You mean violent decisions?
Violent decisions or just stupid,
just terrible,
crazy decisions.
Yeah. It's been 5 weeks since he's killed someone.
Because my first response, I was talking about, wasn't violence. You know what I mean?
Right.
Violence was something that I could eventually will myself into.
Right.
My first response was always to disconnect or I don't know, be introspective to some point. And I was always, I think,
in the moment of stuff going on.
Yeah. Yeah. So if somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, we got to roll these dudes," or whatever.
Right.
I wouldn't immediately, everybody would jump up and get in the car and I would get in the car with them. But on the way there, I'd be like, is this who I want to be? Is this what life is about? Is this how you are supposed to draw a line in the sand to be able to be a better person or something like that? I would always have all these things in my head. Just because
you had a conscience.
Yeah, kind of.
What?
I didn't have a conscience, but I was just always...
Something made you hesitant at first?
Well, I wasn't even hesitant, but I was like, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it for a real reason.
Ah, I see.
Reality, my whole life, I don't know how we're talking about me when the subject is Mike right now, but...
That's right.
So
I always find a way to turn it to me because I'm the most important.
Yeah.
So this is weird to talk about. My entire life, was a disappointment, I should say. all of my fantasies or things that I admired were not based in reality.
Yes.
Does that make sense? And I think that's true for most people.
Yeah.
Like whenever I'm like whenever I'm thinking of being a whole person, the outward things that need to happen in order to make me whole are not real.
Not
and
attainable.
could never be real. And I would know in the moment that that's something that's not real. And so that's why life was such a disappointment, because I'm like, everything is never going to be as good as I can imagine. And so how can I take steps to achieve the closest thing? And this is why I was always so easygoing, because I found that work. I found that people enjoyed my presence more when I wasn't arguing or angry or throwing fits. When Seth was the opposite, Seth was never easygoing. Seth would always be argumentative and
Hell to
angry.
the no.
And people would
love
always
to be around him.
People were drawn to him,
right?
But people would be so frustrated by him.
Yeah.
And I, at the same time, would play the opposite, knowing that it's kind of exploiting the situation a little bit, but I would play the opposite. And so, all that to be said, I still spend 10 years trying to figure out one day. You know what I mean? There's like something in the past where I'm just there's all these things that I still haven't arrived at the truth about. And so I'm always trying to like get on that as quickly as possible so I can make decent decisions before things happen, even as a teenager. And so I remember a lot of situations where it was like, get in the truck and let's go do something violent.
And you're thinking about it the whole time there.
I'm thinking about how this brings value to my own life. And nobody else is. And so I was always different in that. So what I want to know, because I still don't understand it. Because Seth, anytime I ask him, he goes, slag off. And he's drunk in his underwear and he throws a bottle at me.
I tell him to get out of the band.
Yeah. What are you thinking? Or are you thinking at all? In that moment, somebody tells you got to go do this thing. You're about to jump in the truck to do it. What's going through your head?
Fear, for sure. That's the first thing is a definite underlying fear. Like, oh man, I'm going to get hurt. I'm going to get in trouble. But after a while, after doing it a couple of times, you just shut that voice up and you go for it anyway.
Wow.
And that actually hardens you more because for me personally, because I knew I had that fear and then I always had to like put up this front, like I wasn't afraid. Then there was like a duality, within me. Like I knew who I actually was, but other people didn't. And so that just forced me even more to put up more walls, to isolate myself more, and to just like always take it to the next level. So I think it was like survival, I don't know if it was like cognitively like, oh, I need to think this way or I need to get excited about this. It was just like, you know what? Life is dangerous. People are a threat. And so just take out every threat that comes your way. And be loyal to those who are loyal to you, but don't get close to them. Like keep them at a distance.
Right.
So that way you never have friends. Like, I don't ever remember trusting anybody except for when, like my brother would have moments where he'd try to talk some sense into me, or after Seth got saved, he would try to talk some sense into me. But other than that, man, it's a very like survival mode, isolated, distrusting reality. So I don't even know if I was like, there was no thought process. Maybe at first, but after a while, you're kind of just like, shut up, let's go.
So that loyalty, I kind of feel the same about that. The loyalty that I'm showing in that moment was self-serving.
Totally.
But I didn't act like I didn't show that. I acted like I'm just a loyal person and this is what I do.
Right.
But
you had to act like you were down for your friends.
Exactly. But
that
in
kept
reality,
your friends around.
I'm like weighing those options and saying how can being loyal right now going to do enough for me or my reputation or whatever?
Right. And I think it's, there was a couple of situations, and this was a grace from God, where, I'm in situations with cops or whatever, and it's literally brought to my attention very clearly that I'm looking at some serious prison time if I don't stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think for me, like ratting anybody out, that wasn't an option on the table because number one, then you're pushing away this group of friends, and then you're going into prison as a rat.
Yeah.
And people are going to find out.
Yeah.
So there were a couple of times where, situations arrived and God kind of used that. I didn't know it was him at the time, but I look back and I'm like, oh man, he was putting the brakes on that I wasn't willing to put on. And, that's not to say that I don't deserve to be in prison. I deserve hell. But for some reason, it's because he wanted to, I'm not there.
Yeah.
I'm not in prison. So
Yeah.
I found a connection. So, and there's two layers to this. So a lot of this, I think, if you look at, we can find connections, especially with young men, with mental health. If you are depressed and anxious, if you feel unloved and unwanted, if you feel constant anxiety and feel no release from it, but then you're introduced to a group that goes, okay, we'll affirm you, we'll love you. There might be this, I don't know, just for me, like my, non-Christian answer to depression was, well, I need something that'll make me not depressed. And it'll be these guys affirming me. It'll be these guys doing it. So I do whatever it takes to get them to affirm me. And it never really gets rid of the depression because really it's just dealing with some of the symptoms. It's, okay, I'm just coding over the depression, just little moments where I don't think about or feel, but still there. And subconsciously, I think I'm going, no, I know I need to be affirmed. I know I need to be loved and accepted. When you feel complete anxiety, that's why in certain situations you snap and are impatient, or you're worried or tense, or you respond in that way. If you always feel hurt, you'll most likely feel angry. And if you're always in this mode of anger, then if someone touches a nerve or responds, that anger is going to be towards them, but never, and I'm going to get into a different layer of this later, but you never really deal with the heart of it. It's just the symptoms of, okay, I sleep around. That takes away the sadness for a few minutes. I get in a fight. That takes away my need for affirmation in a second. I do this. It gets rid of the rage, but never deals with the core of it. And that's why I think, in some degrees, and I'll get into the other one later because I know someone's going to ask a question about this. Grace actually speaks to mental health because if you are hurt, you will hurt people. If you feel hated, you're going to hate people. But if you feel loved and accepted, it is amazing what grace can do, that you actually go, I don't have to fight, and I don't hate them because I feel so loved. And I'm not anxious because I feel so secure. And I don't need a control because I feel God's in control. And I just wonder how much of this is mental health, that they actually have shown studies. A lot of gang members in inner cities are shown to have PTSD. They see someone get shot at 6, Sanyika Shakur, he wrote the book Monster. He was initiated, I think, at 8 years old into Crips. He killed 2 Bloods and he was like 8 or 9.
Right.
That traumatizes you, but it's a response of he's hurting, unloved, so he does something to feel loved and not feel hurt. But it coats it for a second, but then leads to greater hurt and greater isolation. And now he hates a whole group and he's hated by a whole group. And then it becomes a cycle. His whole life is fighting to maintain this false status quo that didn't heal him in the first place, but it's all he knows. And whereas grace comes in there and goes, no, regardless of this, you rest on Jesus' blood. And if you hide behind that, all these things, no, you are affirmed, you are loved. But I think it's so much easier to pick that up and go back to those places because Jesus, I can't physically see. I'm really resting on a lot of his promises. Whereas this, if I walked into a show and punched some guy in the face and broke his nose, I immediately got affirmation. Right. To have tough guys tell me I was tough was just, I'd get this rush immediately. And I wonder how much of these guys, if you look at their relationships, your relationships and mine, how much was depression, anxiety, not feeling loved, not feeling accepted, not feeling affirmed, all things that in the gospel we see we really are all those things.
Right.
And by a father who doesn't ask us to do evil, who doesn't ask us to do things. So I mean, I don't know. What do you think about that, Mike and Sean? We're going to have a break from our sponsors in 30 seconds. Washo Wieners. You're always a wiener with us. Serving fresh hot dogs since never. Go ahead, guys. Sean's pointing at Mike.
I think, I would hesitate to use the label mental illness, but I totally resonate with what you're saying. And I think that, only because like mental illness, that phrase carries with it a lot of connotations that I don't agree with now. Cause I've been through that whole, taking psychiatric meds and stuff for years. But I would say, I can remember distinct moments as like a really young teenager, maybe 14, 15, where I saw dudes just get laid out, just beaten. And I realized, I thought, I thought that I had come to this realization that, that's what life is. Life is this dangerous reality where I need to fight for survival. And I need to do something to protect myself. But it also connects to another point you were making. If you go further back in my past, I don't think I felt that at home. I didn't feel, I didn't feel loved, heard, accepted. That's not to say that, my house was awful by any means. It's just, I think that was communicated to me through a couple of different scenarios, growing up. But I totally resonate with what you're saying. Like, and it's all fueled, all of that, like the shame and the fear and everything, and needing to feel safe and needing to feel loved. It's all, that all culminates also in a desire to be in a relationship with people and to be accepted and to be like known. And so when you come into a social group and the only way you can form relationships is through violence or things like that, then of course I think like at the core of our being, we're going to do whatever we can to maintain those relationships.
I wonder if because of depravity, we all of our mentality, and I want to challenge people maybe step away from the term, how they think of it, but if we're depraved, maybe all of our mentalities are sick.
Right.
Like if we're all depraved, we all mentally have some state that is sick or unhealthy.
Totally.
Or there's a sickness. But the other layer I wanted to bring up is, even when you get into like bipolar schizophrenia, even if, there is a biological component, and I know some people debate this and think about this, even if you do that where, there is a chemical issue, that person still in that process, wants to know, even in that illness, even in that maybe defect they feel of, oh, there's something mentally wrong.
Well,
to be affirmed and loved and
right.
cared for. And what were you going to say though? Cause you said something changed in your mind and mental illness. I know there's a whole level to this cause you get into stuff of bipolar, schizophrenia. So what do you think, what kind changed on your mind? Cause I know you, dealt with medication for, do you mind me saying what was it for?
Yeah.
It was for bipolar?
Right.
Okay. So what changed?
And depression and stuff. Well, first I was going to say, I think there's an underlying assumption when somebody comes into like a psychiatrist or psychologist's office and they're not doing well, the assumption is there's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with you not doing well. When I think actually from a biblical worldview, of course things aren't going well. And of course people are struggling. And of course they're sad. And of course they're angry. That makes a lot of sense. And so I don't agree with that underlying assumption that we should be happy and that everything should be okay.
Right.
And I think that is the assumption a lot of the time. But what changed for me is, it's not that I deny that there is a biological component sometimes. I think there is. And I think it would be foolish of me to say, like, I experienced quote unquote bipolar and depression and now I'm totally fine. That's, I think that's an erroneous way to think about things because that's using my experience.
That's your story. Yeah.
Right. And kind of just like plastering it across everybody. When I think what changed for me in how I view mental illness and things like that is a lot of the problems that I was told that I had turned out to actually be not just specific to me, but these are human problems.
Right.
Things like struggling against hopelessness, struggling with despair, struggling with, anger. Those are common to everybody. And I think it's foolish to say that you shouldn't be that way. But on the flip side, I also know that, there are some people who have genuine experiences of, like, let's use bipolar, for example. They have genuine experiences of really low depression and then really high seasons of mania.
Totally.
And I don't doubt that. And I think it would be foolish for us as Christians to try to make some sort of pronouncement on a global scale and say mental illness doesn't exist.
Just gospel it. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's one thing that I have to say. I have so many things to say right now. First of all, what I was bringing up about how I'm so different than you guys, but still found myself in the same situations. You made the point I was trying to poorly. What you made it well, I made it poorly. Was that I'm experiencing these things too, just in a different way.
Totally.
It's a human thing.
Yes.
It's not like a specific mindset.
Right.
And even furthermore, like Seth brought up gangs, and how like you want that affirmation and you want to hate another people. I guess tribalism may be a good word to explain it, but I hate that it's such a popular word now, so I don't want to use it, but I guess that kind of defines it well. But
you're so anti-establishment.
Do you think it's any coincidence that a Democrat and a Republican had the exact same colors and honestly, with the exception of bats and guns, the exact same verbal discourse with each other about stuff? It's a human thing. It spans everybody, even like the suburban mom.
Right.
Who's ultra Democrat.
Different.
Yeah, exactly. And through your experience, I believe, the fact, like you said, that grace changes that, I think is spot on. But the danger, like Seth said, people saying just gospel it, I feel like in my situation, when I came to Christ, it was because people gave me a lot of promises about Christianity that weren't true.
They just weren't true.
So like people would say, hey, all of your apathy, all of your hate, all of your fear, all of your rage, that's all going to go away.
Right.
That's all satisfied with.
And you don't find that in Scripture.
Yeah,
so absolutely. I don't know where that came from.
And you don't find that in
half the
in
prophets ask God to kill them.
Right.
Like
exactly.
here's Elijah begging God to murder him.
So
in a
you
cave.
said, Seth, like that you're resting in the power of the blood of Jesus, in the promises that you are a loved child and that you have a good father. You're resting in that promise, but you're not necessarily feeling that in the moment. But that false gospel was what I was told. And actually I got saved into that false gospel, and I feel like had some kind of
false gospel of they'll all go away, or false gospel of resting in the
false gospel that. And it was, half of it was me misunderstanding, and half of it was me being told the wrong things. And this is why I dig so hard into like people like Furtick or Falwell or whoever else that provide this false gospel, because I think it's so damaging, because
it totally
the
is.
power of Christ has saved me and kept me.
Right.
And nothing could take me from his hands.
Right.
But I feel like it was quite a battle with this, what people call organized religion, or with what I would call people who are preaching a false gospel. It was quite a battle to separate myself from what they told me were truths and understand the real truth, the scriptural truth, the truth that is given by God, because I was told the wrong thing. So I got to this point where I'm like, okay, I'm a Christian now. I'm waiting for this satisfaction that I was told I would have, this ultimate satisfaction that solves all my problems.
Like crap.
And yeah, I was still dealing with the same problems.
Well, I think on both, there's a ditch on both sides. So if you just attribute everything to biology and chemicals in the brain, then you are not taking into account what we're discussing when we talk about this is a universally human phenomena. You know, like depression, anger, things like that it's universal because sin is universal. So when you get down to the base bottom root, sin is to blame. And I'm not saying that the answer to that is this spiritual awakening, because we have bodies.
Yes.
So on one side, you can't just say it's only biology and it's only brain chemicals, and this medication will heal that and help that. It certainly, I think, in some situations can. But on the flip side, if you just present somebody like, come to Christ and everything is better, I just don't see that in the Bible. And it doesn't take into account.
And that's the false gospel of just to be clear. So the false gospel is become a Christian, everything will just go away.
Right.
Okay.
Which is totally contrary to
false gospel. Not there's many.
No, it's the. That's
I mean,
you heard first.
The very first call from Jesus is to take up your cross every day.
Yes,
an instrument of death. It's not going to be a pleasant experience all the time. But you, like Seth is talking about, you can hold on to, by faith and by the power of the Spirit, you can hold on to the hope that this isn't all there is.
Right.
And there's something else coming.
Right.
And that includes a new body. So right now we have bodies that are corrupt. Like, our brains, absolutely. I think you were spot on, Seth, when you said that all of our faculties, all of the things that make a human are broken.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get that full, complete healing here and now. It's just not going to happen. So
including our biology and potentially chemical imbalance in the brain.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you deny that we are body and soul as one unified, complete being, then you're going to fall into one of those ditches. You're either going to over-spiritualize it, or you're going to think it's just biology.
There's even I know that the ditch has two sides, and I'm ruining the analogy right now.
No,
and I don't mean to do that, but maybe there's an aqueduct that goes over the ditch. I don't know. But there's this third thing that I've seen happen lately that's a pretty new, relatively new movement, I guess. And it's people would say people who have been on both sides. First, they had a mental illness, or what was described as a mental illness. Then they were promised these things from Christianity. And then they had this period of what I believe everybody's referring to as deconstruction. And I've heard it so many times it's another word that it's being overused, and it's frustrating to me. You know what I mean? But it's like the Mike Gunger and all those folks who just have said, oh, we've gone through all of this, and now we've really figured out the truth. We've distilled everything and taken out all these impurities, and now we found the truth. And the truth is kind of this, What's that guy? The Velvet Jesus Love Wins guy. What's his name? I can't remember his name. Rob Bell. Yeah. It's kind of like in that camp.
Yeah.
And it's
I
like
have a heretic Rolodex in my pocket.
It's like there's this period of deconstruction. And then once you've gone through this deconstruction, finally you're on this right path. And it's like, I don't want that either. I don't want deconstruction. I want reconstruction. Like I still have the same desires that I did when I was 2 years old. I want to be like a whole person.
Right.
I want to be fixed. I want to stop having all of these mental illnesses or physical illnesses or whatever. I want better. And I've always known, this is inherent to me. I've always known that I was created and designed for something better. And I'm always looking for it. And yeah, scripturally, I do see where I am made better. But that's the frustrating thing. We talked about time travel a little bit last week on the podcast, but it's like, it's that already, but not yet.
Yeah.
It's been declared, but not been executed yet, or however it works, or your eschatology may play into it. But either way, like finally knowing the truth has been cathartic for me.
Totally.
You know? And like, being told lies, even lies in the realm of Christian thinking, has been absolutely detrimental to like my mind and my soul, you know? And it's so frustrating. And anyways, that's why I don't like Joel Osteen.
Good reason.
So I think this gets in that whole, the duty of the whole. I think this falls into we kind of think it's either or instead of both and. Like, what if you have someone who has a biological component that's really there? Fine. That doesn't mean there's not metaphysical concepts underlying it. So you can go.
There's both.
Right? Yeah. Like you can say, hey, and let it treat what's meant to treat. Biological is not going to heal a spiritual issue. So say like this, you have a guy who has a mental problem and they say, we can prove you need this medication. And you know what it'll do? It'll treat the physical, it's a physical response, and maybe help with some of that. It doesn't mean beneath that there's not also things of within this illness, I'm feeling isolation, I'm feeling sadness, I'm feeling longing, I'm feeling wanting, and we can do both. That's why I think when you counsel people, you need to say, you know what, you might say you have a problem with sleeping. You might need help with sleeping.
Yes.
But within that sleep, you might have issues though of depression too, or things that were contributing to that biological. Say you already had something that physically made it hard to sleep, but then also within that you have anxiety or sadness or a lack of love, and that compounds it, makes it even worse. So let them do what they're supposed to do. I don't expect when they stitch me up when I have a cut for that to heal my feeling of being unloved.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's not still there. I think of the guys who were lepers, they physically had something that needed to be healed, physically healed. But from being a leper, they also need to be healed of, hey, they were outcasts, they were left on the street, they were ignored. So I have no problem if a guy says, hey, my doctor says, I need this because there is something in my brain, maybe, from fetal alcohol syndrome.
Right.
There's something going on. Okay. That doesn't mean that A, there's not spiritual things compounding it, making it worse, or B, that after they start treating that, you go home and go, well, physically I'm a little better in this one area, but I'm still feeling these things that the doctor, and I get he's not a Christian maybe in this scenario, that he's saying, well, you're supposed to feel completely better. No, maybe it treats a physical, element that was there, but overlooking that within that, there was also some spiritual elements that they missed.
Right.
And you know what? I don't blame him. He's a doctor, not a pastor.
Right.
He's seeing only the biological going, okay, we'll treat it. And maybe it's not that these medicines aren't working. Maybe it's just, well, they treated what they could.
Yes.
It treated to the extent it could the physical aspect, but there was more than physical going on. So that's why you meet someone and go, fine, take the pills if you need to, but also deal with the wounds from your father, also deal with the love you need from Jesus, also deal with the healing you need from being victimized or hurt. And it can be both and. I have no problem with a Christian saying, I take pills for sleep, but I also pray about the anxiety I have on those sleepless nights and the emptiness I feel, because it's biological is not going to necessarily treat spiritual. Now they can work together. The biological, if you're struggling spiritually, biological may make it harder or more apt to give up or feel, I don't even want to try. Like if you have cancer, it's going to affect your energy. It's going to affect, I don't want to get up and pray. So they can kind of play into each other. But I think there's some overlap of let's deal with the spiritual and physical instead of saying, why isn't the physical healing the spiritual? And why isn't the spiritual healing my broken arm? It's like you can have, I think, some overlap. Is that making sense? Like just some overlap.
Yeah, totally.
That we are multifaceted people with many layers.
I would push it even further and say there is always the both combining. So it's always a case of both physical and spiritual, because that's what we can't divide the two. And so you know, Galatians 5 talks about the fruit of the Spirit. You know, if you think that you can have patience with people and not sleep for 5 days straight and still be patient, you're an idiot. You're not. I'm sorry. But you're not thinking things through. You're spiritualizing what Scripture says. Like maybe one of the ways that God develops and grows patience in His kids is by helping them sleep.
So totally.
We always try to like divide things up. And I don't think that's what the biblical authors were trying to do at all.
Absolutely. No. And God is sovereign over science.
Exactly.
Like He created your body, grace. Like the way memories are formed and and your body repairs during sleep. Like God created it that way.
Right. I don't think that the Church of Jesus Christ needs to make these sweeping declarations on things like this. This is a case-by-case basis.
Absolutely.
It's not sinful for me to pursue healing through the common grace of a well-educated psychiatrist.
No.
You're being glib right now.
No, I'm being dead serious.
No,
that's a Scientology joke.
Well, you know what the funny thing is? It doesn't, Jesus shows this in the Garden of Gethsemane you can't say he didn't have correct theology. You can't say he didn't trust in God. And yet he was sweating blood.
Right.
Because he still have physical element of, hey, I still am in a physical body, and thinking of what's going to happen is literally tearing my body apart. I'm bleeding. So I think there's a component of, there's nothing wrong with meeting with someone. And I do this sometimes, when we counsel people. I will ask them, Piper does this. Are you sleeping? What's, your diet look like? Do you have any injuries? Are you going through, if you say, I have constant back pain, it's excruciating. I go, okay, that doesn't mean I can't also say, when you're hopeless, who are you going to? Mm-hmm. And are you going to pain pills to take it away? And are you dealing with the sadness that comes from that back pain? Are you dealing with the frustration? Are you praying in the spirit of, God, help me when I am weak?
Right.
Because these things are going to overlap in a marriage. You can say, I love you all the time. But if you never have physical intimacy, you can say, well, we had the correct doctrine and we prayed. Yeah, but there's also a physical intimacy that transitions into spiritual. You have sex, you have the orgasm, which is amazing. You have that. That's the physical. But it also translates.
Is that what the penis and the vagina?
The penis.
Is that what sex is?
The thing Sho Baraka wasn't allowed to say at certain stores. But it transitions then into a spiritual of if you know the spiritual realities of the covenant and God's love, and you both feel affirmed in that, and then affirm each other in this closeness, you have the physical connecting with the spiritual, and they actually complement each other and become greater. Where the physical is greater, and your appreciation of spiritual can even be in a sense of, this is, what a beautiful covenant God's let me be with my wife. And one day, the affirmation I feel in this in a different way, I'll feel with God, where I'll feel complete acceptance, complete euphoria, non-sexual way, but still this physical pleasure, but coming from a spiritual completion and a physical restoration in the new heaven, new earth. And I think, because sex isn't just for sex, and prayer isn't, think of it, when we pray, we're not praying saying just in some metaphysical way, do something that has no effect on me. We go, provide, please help with the house, please heal this person, please speak to this person. We're praying for the intervention of the spiritual into the physical,
right? For
God specifically to intervene, for the author to come on the stage and say, no, I'm coming into the play and changing it. I'm restoring. I'm directing. I mean,
you
know, you hear me, dog?
I hear what you're saying. I feel like to some degree, people will kind of like you're saying, like you said, Mike, the church making, or I guess any group making sweeping generalizations.
Mormons. It's always the Mormons.
Seth, you were saying like focusing on certain things and making sure that they are correct. That is like a pretty good definition for idolatry. So like if somebody says, hey, like in your example, like my marriage is good. We read the Bible, we have dinner, the kids don't laugh during prayer or whatever, like things like that. But haven't entered into that covenant type of relationship and completely missing the heart of the matter for the technicality of the matter, that's idolatry as much as like creating an idol and bowing down to it. And I think the major problem is that is very synonymous with the way we treat things in American evangelical society. When somebody dies, you have a memorial for them, right? And you memorialize them. And it's super important that the memorial goes well. And that
nothing bad is said about them.
Nothing bad is said about them. And like all of the items that are collected to memorialize them are perfect. Like it can't have any type of flaw or anything like that. Like that's very similar to the idolatry of the 15th century in the Catholic Church, where like the way you had to approach a saint had to be perfect.
Right.
And it's like, that's ridiculous.
That's
I think the stupidest thing I've ever, go ahead. Sorry.
I agree. And I think, you know, at the center of this, maybe not for everybody, but there's this core unchristian idea or belief that weakness, frailty are bad things. But think about it, you know, God created the world and he made us dependent creatures.
Yep.
And our dependency is not a bad thing because God declared it to be very good. So there's a certain element of our lack of perfection is a good thing because it reminds us in a very tangible and real way that we are not God. And when you have something like a funeral where everything has to be perfect and only nice things can be said, that's I think, you know, at the core of that, it just comes from this broken, false view of ourselves, and it's a pretty low view of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Like, I don't have to be utterly perfect. And not only that, but I can't be. God has to do that in me. God has to remake me. God has to do it. It's not up to me. And so if we approach life and we approach mental health, if we approach these things with the idea that it cannot go wrong and I have to be happy and things have to be complete, like that's bullcrap.
Yeah.
It's just not true.
Such language, Michael. No, what about this? I mean, if there is a funeral and someone says, well, I assent to the fact that my father was saved and he loved Jesus and he's in heaven. My first question would be, well, did you weep? Well, no. Did you physically let your body express that too? Your body, when you cry, there is a physical response of no, like you're letting that spiritual reality and even this present reality. And cause here's the thing. You're seeing a physical body in a casket.
Yeah.
Your body has a response. I think it's because we know from being designed for what we're designed for, we look and go, this isn't how it should ultimately be. We shouldn't ultimately look and go, good, I'm glad things decay. No, it's, you need to be able to weep. And I look at Jesus. I bring this up all the time. Lazarus, he knew he could bring him back. He knew everything, you know, he could do, or that God the Father, you know, has the power to, or by his spirit, you know, he could do, or as Jesus, you know, all God and all man could do or call upon. And yet he still wept. So he still allowed himself to have a physical response, but then also give a response of heaven breaking in, of calling him to life and restoring him. And it's like, it's never seen as sinful. And part of this gets into emotions where we go, well, the heart is deceitful, blah, 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 blah. Okay. First off, context. There's always context versus. Secondly, you're ignoring the fact that your logic is just as affected by the fall as anything else.
Yeah.
So logic isn't perfect. Emotions aren't perfect, but it doesn't mean we throw them out. My emotion should be a thermostat maybe, but not the steering wheel. And the same thing with logic. It is a tool God has given me. It should not be everything's based on my logic, because now I'm making my logic God, where that's a standard. And people go, well, people get all emotional and do this. Fine. Then you don't do that. Just because something's been abused, I can do that with anything. Don't throw it out. Calvinism's been abused. Don't throw it out. Well, I've seen people abuse this with authority. Well, we don't throw out authority. So I think we need to once again look at the person and the complete person and say, okay, they're a physical person. They're a spiritual person. They're maybe someone's son. They're the son of God. They're made in his image. They might have ailments. They might have wounds. They might have times where they were disappointed, times where they had victory, and see this complete story where when Jesus talks to a woman in the well, he doesn't just go, listen, John Knox said, no, he goes, oh, so, is that your husband, or is that, what are you doing with this? And he goes, and do you want eternal, water? And he listens to her story and meets the complete person. Even when he talks to Peter, he doesn't say, Peter, recite the Nicene Creed. He says, do you love me? And, I'm trying to remember, I think it was once he says unconditional and then twice he says friendship. So it's, I think, agape and then phileo twice. But he goes to Peter and goes, no, he's speaking to the person in this relational way, but there's a spiritual reality behind it. I think we don't need to throw them out, or make them enemies. I don't think they're enemies, but
right.
Yeah. So I think we just solved everything.
I have a follow-up to this, but first I wanted to ask Michael, what is, this is for Striper tickets, what is your favorite hockey firm?
Getting all European on them.
I don't know.
The Boston Bruins.
Why? Because they're violent?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
So should we?
Because Boston, there's something special about Boston, right?
I hate New York.
They're pretty wicked bad, right?
Yeah, say hi to your ma for me. You said ma. M-A-H-R is ma.
I never said you could park the car in the pile of...
How about Braxton? How about
Braxton? Yeah. How about those skeezy Braxtons?
How about
the Boston Bruins? Okay.
Boston Bruins.
I think that'll be a good Striper giveaway. My follow-up is, I'm curious what your guys' perspective is. Not necessarily mental illness, but maybe just like psychological issues or even just emotional issues. What role does demonic activity
good question.
Play into that, if any? Before a Christian, once you become a Christian... How's that work?
I wonder how many school shooters we should see if they were possessed. I just said that. No.
Well, what role does
it maybe contribute to illness? Does it not at all? Is it sometimes maybe something that compounds it? Is it because we do see in the Bible there was people I think who were physically crippled just because we live in a fallen world. And then there was demon possessed. Yeah, people. There was others where it was there was a physical component showing a physical manifestation. Yeah. What do you think, Mike?
Well, there's a story in Mark 5. The I think he's called the demoniac. Poor guy.
So.
That's how he's known forever.
My name was Doug, but they started calling me demoniac.
And I just thought that was tight, so I was like, all right. Okay.
So this dude's up, like, living in a
graveyard.
The mountains. Yeah, in the graveyard. And he's, like, cutting himself with rocks, it says. And then he sees Jesus, and, Jesus does what he does. But, so when you get people into these really dark seasons of life that can last months or years, I totally think Satan plays on that. I think Satan can afflict believers, certainly unbelievers.
Oh.
Easy
there, Sam Storms.
Yeah. Even though he's bound and powerless.
Don't.
Oh, sorry. No.
We are not getting into post-mill.
If you want to go down that
different conversation
road, we can go down that road.
So, Mike, as Jesus is reigning, what would be your answer to that question?
So, say somebody. Like the classic example that I feel like, a believing mom is gonna use for her daughter who's all of a sudden, painting her fingernails black and
listening to Rob Zombie
and dating a guy with a motorcycle who's a different ethnicity.
Oh my goodness.
And maybe she's, maybe the daughter is like,
voting Democrat.
Have been very depressed lately.
She voted for Jill Stein.
But the mom remembers one time, many years ago, when that daughter played with a Ouija board. Now, it looks like a game from Milton Bradley, but if you didn't know, it's actually a portal for demons.
Sure.
Or not even that. Even a better example. What if that daughter went to a psychic and got a reading from a psychic, or a tarot card reading?
Isn't that such a nerd name? My name's Milton Bradley. Milton?
I know. Is that two people's names? Is that last name?
It's two first names.
I think that guy, one of those
dang
guys
it, Anthony Bradley, but I like Anthony Bradley.
Look what you did.
I'm sorry, man. No, I would never say anything. Well, I like him. I'm biased, so.
I would.
Milton's a name.
So, because I have a lot of these situations where people come up to me and they say, hey, I want you to pray for this person. They're clearly possessed by a demon. They've had suicidal thoughts, and it's because of this situation that they put themselves in when they were 8.
Oh, my goodness.
You don't believe there's any possibility? that they allowed a demonic activity in their life and there's a stronghold?
Checkmate, atheists. I can answer if you don't want to. It's fine. I'm already ordained.
Mike is flabbergasted right now.
Of course, demons play a role. I'm not saying in every situation, but yeah, duh. But demons are just as real as we are, and they're just as active as we are. But I don't know. Satan's goal is, I think he loves to like torment people. But man, it's to drive them away from Christ. And one of the clearest ways he does that is enticing people to sin. So I don't know. My answer would be all over the place. But of course, there's situations where demons are doing some stuff. And do you know how insane this conversation sounds to people who...
I don't know why.
I don't care. I don't give a flute. So,
I mean...
Do you want me... Listen, I'm already commissioned as an elder. They get what they pay for.
That's
Listen.
True.
So, I think, once again, and this is the kryptonite of the American church, nuance.
There's a lot of kryptonite.
Is... you may have some instances where we think it's demonic and it's not at all.
Right.
You may have some instances where it's oppression, but not possession. Like they're attacking and doing things, but not possessed. And then there may be some extreme things. And, Pastor George has seen this a little bit, who was trying to get on the show. Where it was straight up possession. And I think if you look at Jesus, how many people did he heal and they weren't possessed? You know,
right.
versus
there was both.
There was stories of it, but so I think, and you know what, if they're possessed, I think if you spend enough time talking to people, it usually becomes apparent because of the stories I've heard and experiences I've had.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, and here's the thing, you could do dumb things as a kid that spiritually maybe you have some, I would say baggage or bondage or maybe strongholds that need to be prayed about, things that have affected you. But possession, I don't think we should be quick to go to. It's possible, but you need to make sure, and I would say that's why you listen, you pray,
right.
you test the spirit, you talk to the person,
right.
and not go by indicators, because you could say, well, they're doing this, this, and this. Well, maybe there's a dick.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just weird, or maybe they're just rebelling. Or you see some stuff that's just minor stuff and it's off, and then you talk to them and go, oh, there's something spiritual going on. So once again, I think there's some stuff we can do broad strokes with, like, what is the way of salvation? Jesus. What is the chief end of man? To worship him and enjoy him forever and give him glory. But there's some other stuff of like, is this person making the right decision buying this house? Well, that you need to think about, pray through, talk, ask questions, same thing. And now if someone comes in acting just nuts where you see there's supernatural things going on, you might go, okay, but I think we need to be careful not to have a checklist of, well, they
right.
voted for Al Gore. They did this. They watched an Inconvenient Truth and thought it was interesting and well made, and like,
because
I don't know.
Because demons are much more subtle than, most of that is fed by cultural garbage. But man, Satan's much more subtle than that. And
he's not stupid either. He's been
right.
doing this for, the planet's existed, 3 billion years? So he's been doing this.
6,000.
Sorry. See?
Do you know in the Bible?
All 6,000 years of the garden, he was doing now.
Doesn't it say in the Bible the best trick the devil ever pulled was making the world?
That's in Second Robes.
Yeah.
Okay, let me clarify this question. Do you think there's
more ambiguous?
There's some people out there who can be like the demoniac and experience a demonic situation, and neither biological, medical stuff or emotional needs being met will work until the demon is cast out?
Yes.
You do think that?
Yes.
Now, do you think that the what do you think, Seth? Yes, from you too?
He nodded his head, yes.
Okay. Do you think that the church regards that with as much seriousness as it should?
No.
I think we need to get on our Pope hats and hit people with some holy water and just spray them in the face. No, I think there are, because I've seen this in other countries too, there are some people of like, no, you're going to need to really...
Jesus himself says this.
Yeah.
Like, this kind can only come out by prayer.
Prayer, yeah.
I think Satan just attacks us in America differently, and in our arrogance,
I agree.
Since we don't see it a ton here, it doesn't exist. No, I think Satan goes, well, they're a sensational extreme culture. If they saw this, it might make them believe God exists. Instead, he goes, fine, I'll make them fat, make them sin luxury. And by fat, I don't just mean Sean. I mean like, luxury, just gluttony and sloth, just in comfort.
The fat of the land.
Well, yeah, fat of the land. And it says the fat belongs to the Lord. I just want to point that out, but...
Chris Farley.
That's
why we know where he is.
Us, I think it's more subtle where he goes, I'll slowly lead them down the road of hell where in their comfort, they're sipping wine by the fire while the house burns down. Whereas other countries, he goes, no, I'm going to scare them. Like, especially a fear culture, he goes, no, I'm going to possess them. I'm going to threaten them. I'm going to do this. America, I think we'd sensationalize it and maybe believe in God more. So I think he attacks us. Here's the thing. He knows where to attack us. He's not stupid. He's going to go, oh, Peter. Well, I could say, hey, Peter, do you want to betray your friend and ruin your life forever? Instead, he goes, they're going to find out you were with them. They're going to kill you. They might injure you. No one will know. Think of it, you're kind of justified. What if he's not the son of God? And what does he do?
Yeah.
He betrays him 3 times and then goes, oh my gosh, what have I done? And runs away weeping, and he knew where to hit him.
Even when you bring up Peter, it reminds me of like when Jesus is like, get behind me, Satan.
Yeah.
Because he said, nobody will ever get their hands on you or something like that.
Yep.
And yeah, it's
subtlety.
The subtleness is not saying, hey, disbelieve the testimony of your Lord. It's saying, hey,
it's like come up with a different agenda and align yourself with that agenda and pledge allegiance to that agenda.
Yeah.
Defend your friend, Peter. Peter, you can't let him die. Defend your friend. You're sticking up for him. We're supposed to have victory. And he goes, yeah. And then he speaks and Jesus is like, get behind me, Satan. And he's like, why did I say that? And just, he doesn't need to possess us because he's given us porn. He doesn't need to.
Come on, man. Why you gotta do that?
He doesn't need to kill us because we're doing it ourselves. And he doesn't need to divide us because we already hate each other based on politics. He goes, there, we're doing the work. It's like saying, why aren't you stabbing them? They're slinging their own wrists. We're already killing ourselves. Evangelicalism has had gun in its mouth the past 40 years. It's just slowly pulling the trigger.
What does that gun look like?
It's red, white, and blue and has false promises inside. I think
I've seen that gun.
Yeah, I know. I
My
own
friend
it.
had one of those.
It's on that. Just because I don't want our kids knocking on the door being ridiculous. What do you want to close with? Last discussion or last question, Sean?
I was just curious. What do you think about kids saying the Pledge of Allegiance in school?
For the love of... That's not a short one. Dang it, Sean.
You asked me last discussion. It is 8:00.
Listen.
You got time for this?
Yeah. So.
Here we go.
You got time for fake mustaches.
All right. We're going through the Sermon on the Mount at our church. And I think this is the perfect place in the Bible to go when discussing pledging allegiance to someone or something. And Jesus is pretty clear that from our hearts, he demands total and full, complete devotion and allegiance. And there is no ifs, ands, or buts. And he calls out his listeners. He calls them out and says, don't be like the hypocrites. And then you ask the question, well, who are the hypocrites and what are they doing? Well, they are the ones who are devoted to something else in their heart. They give lip service to God by praying and fasting for everybody else to see. But in their heart, they have an allegiance to something else. And it's not God. It's not the God of the Bible. So I think the same thing here. You can't have two allegiances. You really can't. And I'm not one that's given over to nuance very often, so I understand why I could be wrong in this. But when you are pledging allegiance to a country and all that it represents and all that it does, and you're pledging yourself to align with its goals and its ends, when in reality this country's probably look at world history. Countries don't last that long. Mm-hmm. Nations aren't around that long. Mm-hmm. They come and they go. I'm not going to pledge allegiance to anything other than Jesus. And so I'm going to teach my kids that. And I would base that on things like the Sermon on the Mount and in the book of James where it says, James condemns a divided heart, a double mind. You can't have full devotion to this thing and then full devotion to Jesus. You have to give up one of them. And so I'm not saying that we do that perfectly as Christians. Of course we don't. We have allegiances all over the place, and that's called idolatry. And God's solution to that is not that we sit there and cherish it and hold on to it, or even try to nuance it. It's to destroy it. It's to get rid of it. It's to repent from it. So, I mean, I sat my son down when he was in public school, and I said, I don't want you saying the Pledge of Allegiance if your teacher asks you to, and here's why, and explain to him what I just said in much less critical terms. But that's my answer.
Fascinating.
Seth?
All right. So I have no problem with a cop saying, I will swear to do my duties as long as he's and I'm talking about a Christian cop, in his heart, in his convictions, knowing like I'm promising to be faithful to the job I'm taking up. I'm fine with that. The idea of taking a young kid who doesn't even understand the complexities, doesn't even understand fully where they are, and saying, put your hand on your heart, which represents your life, and swear allegiance. I have major issues with it because Matthew Bates just talked about this in his new book. One of the ways you translate faith in some instances is allegiance. And the idea of saying, I swear to an earthly nation my loyalty to its, what it stands for, what it is, to defend it, to fight for it. Here's the thing. I would defend if people came in and invaded, but not because of that allegiance. I would do it because my neighbors are made in the Imago Dei. Someone is imposing evil, and they've given me no other option than to defend. I think self-defense is biblical. I think fighting sometimes is biblical.
Yep.
And I would do it out of that versus I just don't see in the New Testament or the early church this idea of you have to pledge loyalty to earthly nation, especially this, because we'd be making a law, and most would agree with this, or a belief or statement or a command to Christians that isn't universal. And we don't make commands that aren't universal. Like if you command one Christian, it has to be all of them. Because most, if I said, fine, you have to pledge allegiance to North Korea. And they go, well, they're bad though. I'll go, okay, so you're saying one Christian has to follow the command, but others can't. And how bad does a nation have to be that you don't pledge allegiance? Where do you draw the line? Is it,
it might be millions of babies being killed.
Is it 50 million babies being killed? Is it the internment of Japanese people? Is it the slaughter of Native Americans? Is it the opioid abuse? Is it domestic abuse, oppression of the poor? Is it the divorce rate? Is it prostitution? Is it pornography where women are being raped? And if someone disagrees with me on that, obviously I'm not going to break fellowship. I don't hate them. But I think most of the arguments I hear are, well, you're supposed to do this, or well, how can you, that's not what I mean. Well, how can you hate freedom versus, it says to love my neighbor. It says to seek the well-being of all, flourishing. I want to see cities do good and be a blessing in there. And, that people are made in the Imago Dei. But if you notice it, that's for all people. Even the nation my nation hates. Even the people who don't look like me. I want to see my neighbor flourish. And when you ask who's my neighbor, well, whoever has a pulse is my neighbor. So that means, I want Americans to flourish because they're made in the image of God, not just because they're Americans. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having a fondness for where you live because those are people you're in community with. You know them the most. You see them. But when I say, I want Putin to repent and see God, I want to see him flourish. And I want ISIS to repent and see reconciliation. I want all the socialist countries to see God. And I just don't feel comfortable saying on my life I will give my loyalty to this country and having to make all these exceptions. Well, unless it was this. Well, and I usually hear American answers. And here's the thing. I don't see it in church history with the fathers. And I don't see it in the New Testament. I just see the opposite of it. And it's not that I hate this nation, which it's funny because I've had family members fight in multiple wars. I have an allegiance to God, and I don't even want an ounce of that to purposely be devoted to something else or start going, well, if America hates that group, so do I. I want to see all of them flourish. And I just don't, with depravity, it's odd to me that we go, well, our nation, like we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. Well, depravity says we're all the bad guys. There may be practical situations where you go, well, they're directly doing something evil. But I just, I wouldn't subscribe to it, and I would let my son follow his conviction, I think, but I also would be very strong to encourage him to dive into it, because what the funny thing is, and I read this, they don't even do this in Russia. Russia, they don't make you take a loyalty oath every day at school. And we see them as the enemy, and yet we every day, hand on my heart, I pledge my life to America, the same America that had the Trail of Tears. So, and it's great. I support the ideals America is based on and the ethics, but in practice, I don't see it as this perfect nation. The only true allegiance I give is to Jesus. So I'm going by that.
Compelling. Don't look at me like that. I would say this flag that we're pledging allegiance to, these colors don't run. This has always been the same amount of stars, same amount of stripes. It'll never change. It
had a different number of stars in the beginning.
For 2,000 years now, ever since George Washington crossed the Red Sea, this country has been the Christendom, the replacement for the Jews that the world needed.
See, I tried to be charitable, and you're just being a snarky little Mary Sue.
I'm being a jerk. Here's how I feel.
You know what? You're a real patoot. Sorry to say.
you know, me and
Oh, I know.
me and America, we have a funny relationship. It's okay. It's okay when I do it, but other
You
people...
can value America without worship. So.
Yeah, so I would say this. I do feel very privileged to live in America.
We are.
I think that I have not just white privilege, but I also just have a national privilege where I get to say things like this and joke about my country and even say bad things about my dictator or president or whatever you would call it. I can abstain from voting.
Yes, you can. That's
not everybody has the ability to abstain from voting, but I can legally. And there's a lot of privilege. So whoever I owe that privilege to,
God.
Yeah, if God has given me the ability to be in a nation that's so privileged, I do appreciate that. And I don't want to take that lightly. And I know that sounds like I'm being snarky, but I'm serious. I wouldn't take that lightly.
Chris Farley didn't take anything lightly.
I do like the fact that I can be critical of it.
That's true.
But being said,
that's your favorite part about America, is that you can hate America.
That being said, if I could honestly say this, I feel like there are some things that could be better. And if they would just listen to me and change just a couple of things, I honestly think things would improve even more. But I have no power over that. But here's the main thing that I don't understand. First Peter 2, I think, talks about being subject to
I don't like that.
Every human institution. But here's the thing. It doesn't say be subject to the institutions that you're in the locality of. It says be subject to every human institution. And the whole point is the heart around it. You're showing to your neighbor how you are being subject out of freedom. Because it goes on to say, I don't know what it says. It says something like live as free people.
Right.
But giving up your freedom for the sake of your brother. And so it talks about freedom. And I would honestly say, as great as this country is, as much freedom as we have, as much freedom was purchased by soldiers shedding their blood. And the fact that freedom isn't free and all of these things.
Costs $1.05.
There's still a very sinister lack of freedom in the United States of America, especially when you consider it in the fallen world before anybody knows true freedom. Like, we know true freedom now in Christ, but we will know true freedom even more when we're apart from sin. And the fact that we aren't, and the fact that the United States of America or any other great country, what's the best country besides America? What's a good one? I heard the Netherlands is cool because you can do anything. Canada is pretty good. I mean, they just legalized the weed.
Ireland, abortion, is that a thing? I don't know.
I don't think it worked very well, but they say it doesn't matter. Whatever nation is on this planet, we're subject to every human institution, but we still don't know true freedom until we are liberated from sin.
I heard Texas is a great country. But what you're saying, that's the key part. I am subject to authorities and I will try to be obedient to the law as much as is possible. It doesn't say I have to swear an oath of allegiance with my heart. And I think New Zealand's dope, right? Like, that was where they filmed Lord of the Rings. That's a cool place.
I mean, they're cool.
Some of those icy countries, the weird white people, like, I guess, I mean,
Norway, we got a lot of listeners from Norway.
They got a lot of books there.
It's pretty socialized. I think their tax rate is like 45%.
There was a guy, Tim Keller talks about in that article, where he goes to meet these Scottish Reform guys. It's like, oh, brothers, and they agree on everything doctrinally. But then he finds out they were mainly socialists. And he goes, do I break fellowship with them now? So it's like,
yes.
And I'm okay with, here's the thing. Usually I'm okay with people disagreeing with me on this. They're not usually okay with me disagreeing with them. I've noticed that. Like, I go, hey, if you don't agree, that's fine. They go, well, I don't think it's fine. Why do you think this? And blah, 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 blah. And I have to have this whole argument where I go, no, I don't feel like having this huge argument justifying defending myself, especially when you brought no verses to a table or historical evidence. It just, I don't know. The point is, it's just Sean ruined this. He just had to, at the end.
No, it was good.
Give a kick in the balls.
I think it was good because we had like 7 listeners left.
Down to 2.
Just the Norwegian ones that are
well, they don't know what we're saying.
Take your flag and burn it.
Yeah. Is that how they...
Kind of. I have a friend that's Canadian. Norwegian, but I can't say.
Does he live in a cave?
No. Wait, what?
Burn down crosses and...
Black metal.
Black metal. I'm just thinking of
He loves beer.
Is it the guy I met? that. Oh, well, now I feel rude.
Shout out to Guna.
Yeah, he's
from
cool
Norway.
dude.
Have you guys seen that show Norseman?
Yeah.
Pretty funny.
Very historically accurate.
All right, we should wrap it up. So,
do you want to make that the question for the tickets? Is that it, or are we gonna make that?
Yeah,
gonna put that on the post.
I'm gonna do another one. Yeah, we'll make this work. It'll be good.
Are you gonna actually post on Facebook, or will it be me?
I'll do it, and nobody will see it, and then you'll share it, and then a week later, people will look at it. So, I want to give a quick shout out to Chad and Zoe. Chad's an excellent man that I know that was in town, and his dog Zoe has been through many adventures, and he said he would sponsor us if I said that. So I'm going to hold him to it.
Okay, cool deal.
And also, if you haven't noticed by now, we're giving away Striper tickets.
Yes.
And here is the clue. First 3 people to email us and tell us what Mike's favorite hockey team is, and also a colloquial?
That's a hard word.
Colloquialism?
Morissette?
A colloquialism. Colloquialism from that area. So email us Mike's favorite team and a colloquialism from that area, and we will reward you with a ticket to Striper.
Yep.
And
this
a
is
+1.
Real. We're not lying.
This is not a joke. Oh, yeah. And it's in Reno, Nevada on November 11th. So if you live in Norway, I'm sorry. Unless you want to travel.
Sorry, Sven.
It's worth it.
It's worth traveling. And if you live in Norway and you can't make it, but you still win, we'll give you a CD or something.
We love you, socialist, weird white people. Yeah, these colors don't run, but...
You want to close it out? Final thoughts with Mike.
I have nothing. Mike, you want to drag this on even more? What are you doing? Nope. Okay.
I say we kill it now.
Yeah.
Destroy it.
I'm gonna get messages about this from the union. Zip it up! Oh, wait. Send emails to talesfromaditch@gmail.com. I will read them when I feel like it. Zip it up! You say zip it out.
Zip it out.
Zip it out!
So climactic.